Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to have you with us here in these overnight hours, just a little past 2 a.m. here, local time on the East Coast. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at the Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX is running things back for the launch of the Starlink 10-51 mission following a last minute scrub of their launch attempt yesterday due to poor weather in the recovery zone. The company is back again, preparing to launch its Falcon 9 rocket with 29 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites on board. As you'll undoubtedly have noticed in the background of some of our shots, there's a notable amount of lightning that's popping off, seemingly right behind the pad, as you can see right there. Thankfully, as you take a look overhead from NOAA's Goes East satellite, taking a look down at the Florida Peninsula, that cell that we're seeing through our cameras is pretty well offshore. So good news there. That's one of the reasons why the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 95% chance for favorable weather for liftoff today. However, if you look up towards the top right-hand corner of the big box here on your screen, you can see quite a bit of activity off the coast of South Carolina. And unfortunately for SpaceX, that is somewhat in proximity to where the booster would be landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, with a successful liftoff today. And it's because of that offshore weather near the Carolinas that the meteorologists with the 45th were forecasting a medium risk for the booster recovery weather on a scale of low to medium to high. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch again today, decides to stand down because of said booster recovery weather, or were there to be an issue with the rocket or some ground systems, their backup opportunity tomorrow has slightly worse liftoff conditions, going from 95% favorable today down to 70% favorable tomorrow, and trades cumulus clouds for liftoff winds, and meteorologists also tracking additional risk criteria of low to moderate risk for interference by upper level wind shear, as well as the booster recovery weather tomorrow, a risk of moderate to high. So things not getting any better in the booster recovery zone if they're unable to launch today. We'll see if conditions are acceptable to them this morning. 53 minutes, 24 seconds on the clock remaining. We'll all learn together. As we're getting things going here this morning, I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. This is going to be quite a long launch day for our team here. So got some folks who are off shift this morning, some who are soldiering through. We're very grateful for it. One of those is John Pisani, who will be tracking this morning's flight. Michael Caine shooting as well. Adam will be in the loop once we're in our coverage for the New Glenn launch later on this afternoon, as currently scheduled. If you're not following the team on X, you can find them at their handles here. John is at John Pisani Photo. Michael at MD Kane Jr., and Adam at Aburn NYC. Also, if you're not following Spaceflight now, you can find us on most social channels simply by searching for Spaceflight now. We're also joined this morning by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, checking in from the Titusville area. Taking a look at our chat here, I want to thank the more than 300 of you who are either staying up late or getting up super early with us for this launch. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage today. Also want to thank our moderator in the chat, Rick Donner, for helping us out. You can make Rick's job that much easier just by following the rules of the chat. We ask that you post your message in English so that Rick and any of the other mods who pop in during the course of the broadcast can respond as appropriate. We also ask that you hold off from delving into overt topics of politics and religion and don't use all caps when you type your message. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so that others can see their message. Last but not least, we ask that you treat each other with kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. And we'll all get along swimmingly. I also want to thank one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for being in the chat to help answer folks' questions throughout the course of the broadcast. Speaking of our channel member community, they make this and every other live launch opportunity possible. So thanks to folks like Richard W., aforementioned Cumulus Granatus, and a whole host of new members that we've got on board now, thanks to another one of our channel members, Artemis, who is kicking off this overnight early morning launch with quite a bit of generosity, for which we are immensely grateful. Artemis gifting 150 channel members as we began the broadcast here today. So big thanks to Artemis for that, and to our now 150 newest gifted members. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Artemis in the chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Last little bit of housekeeping with about 48.5 minutes remaining on the clock. If you have a comment or a question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or just want to offer a bit of support this morning, you can follow the lead of folks like, once again, Artemis, also Michael McRory, by using the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or query elevated for discussion. Of course, if it is appropriate to be read aloud as part of the broadcast. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is greatly appreciated, especially on big launch days like this, where after this launch coverage for the Starlink 10-51 mission, our team's going to take a bit of, well, I say a rest, not really much of a rest. It's going to be a fairly quick pivot into getting set up for robust coverage of the NG-2 mission from Blue Origin, carrying NASA's Escapade spacecraft. So, in support of all that, thanks again to channel member Artemis for first a very generous $100 super chat, saying aptly, Leroy Smith. Thank you, Artemis. And he comes back with a $50 super chat. Big thanks to you, Artemis, who says very kindly, love you, Will. Keep killing it. Well, thank you. Powered by sheer force of will this morning to keep going with this coverage, but it's important to keep everyone informed about what's going on here, both at the Kennedy Space Center and at the Cape. So, long and odd hours though they may be, it's certainly a wonderful job to have, and there's little else I'd rather be doing at 2:23 in the morning. Maybe sleeping, but a rocket launch ain't too bad either. We'll come back to the super chats here in just a little bit, but for the time being, let's pivot back to the mission at hand. Talk about the countdown timeline, the milestones ahead for SpaceX as they are hopefully able to launch this Falcon 9 rocket this morning. In just about in less than 10 minutes at around T minus 38. That's generally speaking the point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if they feel like they're in a good position to do so, they can make that call ahead of the 38-minute mark. Once that green light is given, tanking begins at T minus 35 minutes with a loading of RP1, which is a rocket grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the rocket's booster. Half an hour before a liftoff, SpaceX starts to load a cryogenic helium to the pressure vessels for the first stage. Same will be true on the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium, of course, is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP1 tank is expected to be full. And at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the Strongback chill down. SpaceX at this point in the count is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad. We see this visually as the big vent, which here at Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center begins at about T minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds, lasting a solid 4 minutes in duration. It sets the stage for liquid oxygen to begin flowing on board the rocket's upper stage at the 16-minute mark. T minus 7 minutes is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. This is when SpaceX flows a little bit of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes before takeoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the Strongback, the large white truss structure next to the rocket. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then The Strongback, otherwise referred to as the transporter erector, will recline a few degrees away from the rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before flight, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 has entered into its automated startup, control the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director, if they are ready to proceed, will give their confirmation that they are go for launch at T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and weather permitting, and all is healthy with the rocket, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 departure. Currently targeting just about 3:10 a.m. Eastern, 8:08:10 UTC for our friends around the world. Just about 41 minutes from now. Now T minus 39 minutes, 13 seconds and counting. As you look at our wide shot here, it appears that the cell that we've been watching offshore may be moving a little bit further to the north, starting to push not quite out of range of our camera shot here, but it's starting to drift that direction, sort of a lazy northeasterly sort of jaunt. Taking a look back at the goes east satellite loop here, you can see what I mean. Things looking fairly consistently disturbed up in the booster recovery weather, so we'll periodically pop back to this outlook and see if things are progressing in a better direction or what things are looking like out of the booster recovery weather, since that was the linchpin yesterday and may be what this launch turns on again today. past the 38-minute marker, now at T-minus 36 minutes, 26 seconds. At this point, if SpaceX has made the call that they are going to progress into prop load, as indications seem to suggest, fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket set to begin in about 1 minute. Taking a look back at our live chat here, want to thank Artemis once again for another very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that, Artemis. Thanks so much for the support at that level. Artemis says, I'd love to hear the Spaceflight Now team on how the Starlink sats affect things like astrophotography and other observations. Well, as one of the non-photographers who's part of the team, and not sure that I'm among the more qualified members of our squad to really speak intelligently about this, but in our video about the 10,000th Starlink satellite launched, we did touch on that with now X-ray astronomer Jonathan McDowell, some of the concerns from the astronomy community about the increasingly large both Starlink as well as other burgeoning LEO constellations and how those may affect ground observations from things like radio astronomy and visual astronomical observations. To their credit, though, SpaceX has been working with those communities to try and lessen the impact from the Starlink satellite fleet to things like making newer iterations of those spacecraft dimmer so that they cause less interference with some of those observations, but it's still a concern, certainly to some extent. One of the things that Jonathan McDowell noted in our conversation, and uh, Stephen, our editor, is hearing from amateur astronomers, is that there certainly are more Starlink streaks that are appearing in observations, which can be removed, but that takes A, more work, or B, longer periods of observation, which obviously takes time and takes money. So it's an effect that can be worked around, but not at a cost either to the quality of the observation itself or to the research outfit or amateur astronomer, depending on who's trying to take the observation. So it's a fair question. It's a good conversation that should continue to go on as, of course, Starlink is joined by Amazon and its Project Kuiper and the LEO constellations coming out of both China as well as things like the proliferated low Earth constellation from the National Reconnaissance Office and other government entities. Moving back to our mission here tonight, though, you can see the frost line starting to build at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket, just beneath the X in SpaceX. Some notable vapor there on the side of the vehicle. Good visual indication that SpaceX is, in fact, tanking its Falcon 9 rocket and will be targeting a liftoff here Currently planned for 3:10 a.m. Eastern, 0810 UTC. Time now T minus 26 minutes, 53 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, SpaceX is loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on both the first and the second stages. Coming up on the big vent here in the next several minutes. But before we get there, the booster that is supporting today's Falcon 9 launch, B-1069 of the SpaceX fleet, getting ready to launch for a 28th time. So let's take a step back in time and talk about the booster history, learn more about where it's been before we see, hopefully, where it's going next. This booster began flying back on December 21st of 2021 with the Cargo Dragon mission, the 24th for SpaceX as part of its Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract with NASA. That was followed up by a batch of Starlink satellites, 4-23 on August 28th of 2022. Mission for Eutelsat and their Hotbird 13F spacecraft followed up on October 15th. And then the 15th batch of OneWeb satellites to launch to date was December 8th of that year. Moving into 2023 with another batch of Starlink satellites, Group 5-3 on February 2nd, and a pair of communication sats for Luxembourg-based SES with their SES numbers 18 and 19 spacecraft. And then at that point, this booster is basically all Starlinks all the time, bringing us into the present. So we'll throw these up on screen, but for the sake of repetitiveness, we'll verbalize all of them. But you can see the run of Starlink missions on the first page, and then we got to turn over here, bringing us up to the present, where coming up to this next launch. As I say, launch number 28 for this particular first stage booster. SpaceX is working to certify its first stages for up to 40 flights apiece. So operations like this are very important on getting that good repetitive flight data across a wide variety of mission profiles. 23 minutes, 42 seconds on the clock. Our thanks to one of our channel members, Wolverine Warlord, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Wolverine. Thank you for the generosity. And to our 5 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Wolverine in the live chat. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Now T minus 20 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. You can see the big vent now getting underway there at the pad. SpaceX conditioning the feed lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. This vent will last about 4 minutes in duration. Time now T minus 16 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. As you can see, the big vent has wrapped up and SpaceX is now loading liquid oxygen aboard the rocket's upper stage. Time now T minus 14 minutes. Counting. As we're getting ready to see the Falcon 9 rocket take flight, let's go ahead and talk about where it's going to be going, if it's able to leave the pad today. Talking a little trajectory here. The Falcon 9 rocket will, of course, be lifting off from Historic Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's set to fly on a northeasterly trajectory with the first stage booster separating a couple minutes into the flight, targeting a touchdown on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. As we've been talking throughout the broadcast and showing you periodically, whether in that recovery zone, well, yesterday it proved insurmountable and SpaceX had to stand down from a launch opportunity. We'll see if things are acceptable enough that SpaceX is willing to move forward with the launch and landing attempt today. SpaceX also intends to recover the payload fairings that are currently encapsulating the 29 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Once they splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, a bit further downrange from where the drone ship is situated, they'll be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel like the one you see here on your screen, brought back to Port Canaveral. They will then be turned over to the Hangar X site where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. SpaceX intends to certify its fairing halves for up to 40 flights apiece, same as their boosters. 12 minutes on the clock, about 5 minutes from now, will be the engine chill down sequence. Time now, T minus 10 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Thanks to the a little more than 1,100 of you who are watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream to allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage today. Also want to thank some of our channel members for their support this morning. Thanks to Wolverine Warlord, marking 25 months with us now as a channel member at the launch director level. Appreciate the ongoing support. Wolverine says, "Hey, Will, hope life is amazing. Heard anything else on Artemis 2? Next spring will be so exciting." Of course, they've got a fully stacked vehicle inside the vehicle assembly building and are going through a series of tests and checkouts in the next couple of months before they would be nominally rolling out to Launch Complex 36B in the January timeframe for a launch attempt in February. At this point, it seems like things are continuing to track towards a a possibility certainly of a February launch, though they have just a few days per month to get that rocket off the pad. So not inconceivable that it would slip outside of February to March, but it seems like things are decently enough on track that February is still within the realm of possibility. Also want to thank Virginia Pruitt for a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Virginia. And a thanks as well to Michael McRory for gifting another 5 memberships. Appreciate the generosity, Michael. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Michael in the live chat. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Also, thanks to Pete Caldwell for a $5 super chat. Appreciate the support this morning. Also, as the countdown continues to progress towards the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, hopefully in just about 7 minutes from now. If you haven't already, now's a great time to hit that subscribe button. It's a quick, easy, and free way to support what we do here at Spaceflight Now. When you do, be sure to ring that bell icon and turn on notifications so that you'll be alerted when we post new videos as well as get new live coverage started. You're definitely going to want to be with us this afternoon as we cover the NG-2 mission, Blue Origin's second New Glenn rocket to take flight over at Launch Complex 36 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying NASA's Escapade mission, a pair of twin spacecraft with science instruments from the University of California, Berkeley. It's going to be heading out to Mars for a science mission to better understand the red planet's magnetosphere and how it's been impacted by space weather, solar wind, and the like. How that may have informed the loss of what was once upon a time a robust Martian atmosphere. Just about 5.5 minutes remaining. We should be getting pad level views and mission audio from SpaceX coming up here in just about a minute or so. As we await that, want to thank channel member Norman Reitzel for a very specific $17.43 super chat. Not sure if that specific number has meaning or just wanted to stand out in that way, but appreciate the super chat regardless, Norman. Thank you. Norman says, is weather questionable? Your camera views show well-built cumulus clouds with lightning. Yeah, Stephen, if we can bring up the uh, goes east loop one more time just to show folks, there is that nice cell that is sitting pretty far offshore, but it is perfectly positioned to be behind our cameras here. So not as threatening to the pad, but you can see the booster recovery weather still looks pretty ominous off the coast of South Carolina. So that's what scrubbed the mission yesterday. We'll
Strongback
see
retract has started.
how they fare today. Meanwhile, as you just heard, we are getting mission audio and pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket here. The Strongback retraction now underway. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, that large white truss structure, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. As we're nearing the end of first stage liquid oxygen loading, I want to thank Mr. Mikey for a 20 rupee super chat. Appreciate that. Also, thanks to K2 Hat for the $2 super chat, saying thanks for the coverage again. Thanks for being back with us, K2.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
As just heard, with less than 3 minutes remaining on the clock, the first stage liquid oxygen tank has now reached flight levels. You should hear a similar call on the second stage at around the T-minus 2 minute mark.
Let's go northeast, yeah.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
With that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Seeing now the ground gas closeouts, SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad.
Ground gas closeout.
With that call, SpaceX is closing in on the final minute before a liftoff when the rocket will enter into its automated startup. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm whether or not they are, in fact, go for launch in the next few seconds.
LD, go for launch.
And good news, confirmation, SpaceX is go for launch, coming into the final 30 seconds before liftoff. 30 seconds. Fifteen seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-51 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the towers.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Now a little more than a minute into flight, rocket traveling faster than the speed of sound, approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Max Q.
Now through that gate, SpaceX will throttle up on those 9 Merlin 1D engines. Next up is MVAC chill, where they thermally condition the upper stage engine.
MVAC chill.
And a good confirmation of MVAC chill there. We're now coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds, followed by stage separation, then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings are set to jettison at about 3 minutes into this flight. Coming up on MECO. Here you see MECO.
Main
Stage
engine
separation.
cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC
Good
startup.
callouts. Good visuals. And good tracking by John Pisani. And our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs as well. Fairing jettison happening now.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good view of those 29 Starlink satellites on board. Those fairing halves will make their way back down to a splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean, a little bit further downrange from where the booster will land on the drone ship. A short fall of gravitas. We're now about 3.5 minutes into this mission so far.
Both
Coming up
stages are on
next
a nominal trajectory.
with a good confirmation of nominal trajectory on both the booster and the upper stage. The 3-engine entry burn set to begin a little bit past the 6-minute mark in the countdown, or in the launch timeline, I should say.
Both stages continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
Now more than 5.5 minutes into the mission. We're about 30-ish seconds away from the start of the entry burn.
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Good call, good visual on the start of entry burn. You've also just heard that the flight termination system, or the FTS, has been safed. No longer needed at this stage in flight.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
Now T plus 7 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Coming up next will be the start of the single engine landing burn, which will begin
Stage
just
1
before
transonic.
the 8-minute mark in this flight. As you heard, the booster now transonic, traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 is in terminal guidance.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
And a good recovery of B-1069 landing for a 28th time.
MVAC shut down.
Nominal park orbit insertion.
With those two confirmations, the upper stage will now coast until T plus 54 minutes and 41 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn on that upper stage engine to circularize its orbit. And the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 3 seconds post liftoff. And with a good liftoff and landing of this first stage booster and the upper stage on its way to good satellite deployment here in less than an hour, I'm going to go ahead and turn to our mission stats as they currently stand. As we get ready to come into our mission stats as things currently stand, want to briefly thank Michael McRory for a $2 super chat. Feeling as I think we at the team here are glad to see this one now behind us. Of course, for those who've been following what's going on with commercial space flight and the ongoing federal shutdown here in the United States, the FAA has issued an emergency order that, with very few exceptions, is limiting commercial launches to within a certain bracket of time in the overnight hours. No earlier than 10 p.m. local time, no later than 6 a.m. local time. So we're, as long as the standoff on Capitol Hill continues on, we will be in largely a pattern of night launches that essentially curfew set to go into effect tomorrow, or yes, today is Sunday. Tomorrow on Monday, November 10th. So if the Blue Origin New Glenn rocket with the Escapade mission can get off the ground today, they won't have to worry about getting a waiver from the FAA in order to proceed. But if they are still on the ground, they will need to work with the FAA to get clearance on that. With this liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, that was the 28th flight of B-1069 in the SpaceX fleet. This was SpaceX's 560th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 143rd of the year so far. This was the company's 495th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. As we keep track of this rolling 365-day stat, this was the 169th orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 120th orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 39A. This also being the 290th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's where the bar chart currently stands. Moving on to some recovery stats now. This was the 131st good landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. Marked the 434th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 531st booster landing for SpaceX as well. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 93rd orbital launch from the Sunshine State. Pausing to note that with this launch between Cape Canaveral Space Force Station and the Kennedy Space Center, this ties the total number of orbital launches achieved across all of 2024 from here in Florida. So with the launch of New Glenn tomorrow or later today, if that is able to happen, barring any weather hindrances or technical issues with ground systems or the rocket, that will be the record-setting 94th launch from here in Florida. This morning's launch was the 150th from U.S. soil, the 164th from a U.S. rocket company, including, of course, those launches of Electron from down in New Zealand. And this was the 258th orbital launch around the world. A couple of flights from China between the last Falcon 9 rocket launch we had and the one just now. There have been 5 orbital failures so far this year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here on the Starlink 10-51 mission. Want to thank our friends Pete Carsons with Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. We should be joined by Pete later on today for coverage of the New Glenn mission. Thanks to Rick Donner for holding it down in the live chat here with us, and thanks as well to Cumulus Granatus for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Big thanks to photographers John Pisani and Michael Kane, as well as to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, running the technical operations of the broadcast. Adam will be back in the loop for the NG2 mission. So once again, if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, do so in the next few hours and be sure to ring that bell icon. We hope you're able to join us this afternoon when we have a couple of hours of live coverage leading up to what will hopefully be the launch of the second ever New Glenn rocket from Blue Origin. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.